is Danielle. I am a member of No One is Illegal in Ottawa. I just wanted, before we take time to eat together, I just want to take a little bit of time to say why we're here today. So today is the 1-year anniversary of the migrant strike in Lindsay, Ontario. There were 191 people in migrant detention, in immigration detention, that were on strike at one time last year in September. Two people made it up to 65 days, and that was a big moment for those people in Lindsay. Lindsay is the detention center where the longer-term detainees are held in immigration detention. So there are immigrants detained across Canada, but a lot of the longer-term ones are all in Lindsay, among other detainees as well. So the demands of the strikers are as follows, or were as follows, and are still the same demands. So the first one is freedom for the wrongly jailed. So they want release of all migrant detainees who have been held for longer than 90 days. So Canada is one of the only kind of North American and European countries to have an indefinite kind of linked to immigration detention. So while migrants are held for either be released or deported, in Canada there's no limit to how long they can be held waiting for that processing. Whereas in the United States, for example, there's a maximum of 90 days for processing. So that was the first demand. The second one is the end to arbitrary and indefinite detention, implementing and blah, blah, blah. I guess this is, again, this one is reinforcing the first one. So the first one was releasing everyone who's been detained for over 90 days. The second one is implementing a maximum of 90 days. The third one is stopping the maximum security holds. So immigration detainees should not be held in maximum security provincial jails and should have access to basic services and be close to family members, which is not the case in a lot of situations right now. And the fourth demand was an overhaul of the adjudication process, so the detention review process that happen on a monthly basis right now is a complete fraud. So what people and migrants want is fair and full access to legal aid, bail programs, and pro bono representation. So those are the four demands. So after the strike, the pressure remains the same from the inside and from the outside. There have been other subsequent actions, including in June, a boycott of the detention reviews. There's also a report released by the End Immigration Detention Network back then, at the same time, that was denouncing the arbitrariness of detention review, who's released, when, how. There's a lot of variation from region to region, depending on which arbitrator, I don't think they're not called arbitrators, but which person is reviewing your detention conditions. The release conditions were also dropping in the last few years. So all those things were done. And also in July, the UN issued an opinion stating that the Canadian government is breaking international law with regard to indefinite immigration detention, and was denouncing the situation that was happening here in Canada. So today we're here to talk about all of these things, to stand in solidarity with people who have 1 year ago today started a migrant strike with all of these demands. So there were also actions, I think, in up to five locations in Canada: Montreal, Toronto, Guelph, and one other, Ottawa and Hamilton. So we're working alongside all of those folks on this campaign as well. So I'll leave it at that for the campaign. If people have questions, there's pamphlets, there's leaflets, you can also ask us and we'll try and answer as best we can. So the next step, just before we head to the food part, we have a bunch of folks, supporters from the community that are here with information, tables, various groups. So check them out, go have a chat, say hi. That's what we're here for, to connect, to talk. Outside there's also the kind of the main table for No One Is Illegal and Justice for Deepan. And then, yeah, if folks are into donating, there's a little jar at the front that'll go towards No One Is Illegal's work around ending immigration detention in Ottawa, mainly. And then there's also a few t-shirts left that might have been all gone by now, but almost, for the Solidarity City, Building a Solidarity City campaign, which is another campaign that No One Is Illegal is working on in Ottawa right now. So check those things out. Food. We've got food donated by a bunch of different groups. So Bread by Us donated 6, I think, wonderful loaves of bread. They've been big supporters of No One Is Illegal. They're in Hintonburg, I believe. They held a fundraiser for us last few months ago. So bread, Green Door donated some chili, I believe, or something like that. Bridgehead donated coffee and tea. And then No One Is Illegal members cooked stuff and also bought some food for everyone here tonight. So thank you everyone. If I'm missing anything, speak now. Yes, go for it. You can close it up.
So our plan is that our speakers can come, but we're going to have folks talk around 7:20. So just give a good 45 minutes to an hour to just mingle and talk and eat and have dinner together. But also, if you have experience, like the guy that I bought the vegetable biryani from, I just mentioned what the event was about, and he was like, yeah, I was on the inside, it was terrible, and he started just talking to me about his experience inside there. So if you have experiences that you want to talk about, I hope he comes back when he's done work delivering food and just come talk about his experiences there. So it happens to a lot more people than you think. Even the guy who's delivering the food for you has had to go through this system when he's done nothing but try to immigrate here, right? So if other people want to come up, I'm going to keep a speakers list. If you want to have a discussion or questions or just want to talk about your experiences, just come up to me, and then we'll put you on the list for going up on the microphone. We're hoping after some speakers we can get into some community discussion or just a back and forth about different strategies that folks are doing. So thank you very much. Thank you, Elder Thomas, and enjoy the food. Okay, so he's the guy with the orange scarf. What can I tell you about Usman? Usman is one of the members of No One Is Illegal. He has a fabulous sense of style, and he likes to dance. And he's going to just talk about his experiences with.
Thanks for coming out. So we have. So I'm gonna talk a bit about the American immigration detention system. I had some personal experience with that, but I was also an organizer in the U.S., and so I'll speak a bit about that. And then we'll go into talking about the Canadian immigration detention system, and then maybe an overview of sort of the immigration detention systems across Turtle Island. So. My experience is primarily, like Lucayo said, in the American immigration detention system. I lived in the U.S. as a non-status person with my family for 12 years, and after 9/11, there was the Patriot Act was passed, and there was building up of state security surveillance systems and racial profiling of Muslim men. And so my father and I, along with a lot of other Muslim men, got rounded up after 9/11. There was actually, in the Patriot Act, there was a special sub-act called the Special Registration Act, which basically said that all non-citizens from particular, I think they had 13 or 16 countries, all male non-citizens from these countries have to come and register with the government. All the countries except for North Korea were Muslim countries. And so, thinking back about it, I like to draw parallels between detention of Japanese citizens or Japanese immigrants, World War II, but it was done in a way so that it was sort of updated. There weren't camps that you go to, but you register with the government keeps track of you. A lot of Muslim men ended up getting put into detention after that. My father and I were included in that. And then depending on sort of what the charges were or what the evidence was against you or what the government's sort of intentions were, some folks were released, some folks were put into deportation proceedings, some folks were put in detention indefinitely. Some folks were deported to U.S. sites abroad, where they were sort of U.S. government property, and so there was a lot of wide-scale abuse post 9/11 in the U.S. Of surveillance powers, security powers. So basically, after my father and I were detained, for a couple of weeks, and then we were able to be released on bail, but we were placed in deportation proceedings. And initially, there were state security charges brought up. Those security charges were based on secret evidence. So secret evidence was another concept introduced by the Patriot Act, which was basically, it means the government has evidence against you, but they can't release it to you or your lawyers or the public because it's secret.
Oh my God.
So they had secret evidence against us. The judge actually was the judge presiding over. Oh, I should mention. So the courts were all being run by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which was a new department agency created post 9/11, and so these were courts without juries. There was one judge in those courts, and then the judge made decisions around deportation, rendition, detention, and there was no chance for an appeal. These Department of Homeland Security courts were often based in federal courts, and and so in my case, so secret evidence, going back to secret evidence, in my case there was secret evidence. The judge forced the government to release the secret evidence, and they didn't have any evidence. But in a lot of cases, the judge presiding over the trial didn't force the government to release that secret evidence. And so, I just got lucky, really. But so once the judge knew that there wasn't any secret evidence, my father and I were both placed in deportation proceedings. And then I want to say 5 years we were in deportation proceedings, fighting deportation in court. And eventually we ended up losing the legal battle, and I ended up getting deported. So I guess from my experience, I I would say I was one of the people who got off easily. There was lots of Muslim men who were detained for much longer, who were deported much more quicker, and so that continues to this day. Although like the Patriot Act and the Special Registration Act are still in place, and so none of those security apparatus that were placed after 9/11 have really disbanded. You don't hear about them as much because they're sort of normalized now. Yeah, so that's kind of my experience with the U.S. and the. I should talk about the detention part too. So the detention, it was a separate detention system, separate from the prison system. I don't know what it is now, but this was five years ago. And so we were actually sort of placed in higher security prisons than, like there was basically special detention prisons that were built. Initially they were in the same sort of prisons, different wings, but we were placed in a special like Department of Homeland Security prison. And so really the Department of Homeland Security kind of does a bit of everything. They run the courts, they run the jails, they kind of oversee ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the FBI, and so they're responsible for rounding up immigrants for detention as well. So they're, vertical integration. Yeah, I don't know what else.
Do you know about the Canadian security certificates that have?
Right.
And how that's the parallel in Canada?
Yeah. So the state, there's security certificates, and basically, I think it was the Minister of Public Security or something? Public Safety. Yeah. But this is before. But basically the Minister of Public Safety can issue these security certificates, which basically you can detain people based on very little evidence. After 9/11, they were used to detain mostly, I think, if not all, like Muslim men or men of color. And these security certificates were basically used to detain them for indefinite periods. There's still people fighting their security certificates. Mohammed Harkat, is Mohammed Majoub still? Yeah, Mohammed Majoub. So they're still fighting the security certificates, and there really is there doesn't seem to be a process once that security certificate is issued to revoke it or fight back against it. And there's no oversight of how these security certificates are issued. There's no accountability for those security certificates. But I do know that initially many of the security certificate detainees, when they were initially detained, were detained in Millhaven prison in the maximum security wing there. I think they had a separate wing. They had a separate wing, but they had a special name for it too. They made something like that. And so it was similar to the U.S. and how there was in the U.S. there wasn't a security certificate process, but it was a special registration process, and to me, it seems like the security certificates were targeted towards individuals. The special registration system was targeted towards entire communities. And so you had, I remember when we initially went to register, there was we had to go to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security building in Philadelphia, and there was a line basically going around the building of black and brown men. What? Oh, and then the FBI. I'm sort of like I haven't prepared for this well, as you can tell.
It's okay.
But there's also the other side of it, which is the enforcement side of it. So Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, works closely with the FBI in the U.S., rounding up, going into people's homes. About a year after I was deported, my father, so I left the country. My father didn't leave the country, he went underground. And so about a year after I left, there was an ICE raid, Immigration Customs Enforcement SWAT raid on my mother's house. And so those are quite routine that they kind of do to try to capture folks who are running away from detention or deportation, and they sort of serve as the enforcement wing of the Department of Homeland Security. Initially, there were non-criminal immigration enforcement unit, but after 9/11, they changed to having SWAT teams and the authority to kill and just like regular soldiers. Yeah. That's it.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Superman. So, I mean, we're going to talk about this more about how the American and Canadian systems are intertwined, as they're, even though they're different colonial bodies on Turtle Island, also known as North America. But our next speaker is Deepan Bodlakati. Oh God, what can I say about Deepan? He texts a lot, texts me a lot. So anyways, the story of Dee is that he was born in Canada. I'm wearing a t-shirt, I could just read it to you.
Yeah.
Support Deepan Bodlakati, born in Canada but facing deportation.
I'm no longer facing deportation though.
Okay.
I'm currently classified stateless.
Oh, you're classified stateless. So how this occurred is that, how do we put it? When Dee was a younger dude, he fell in with the wrong crowd, he broke the law, he did his time, and then after you did your time, and they were watching you, right? And then they put up charges that you need to be deported on this technicality that your parents were working at the embassy at the time, so that means that you're not a Canadian citizen, even though you were born here, just because your parents were working at the embassy. And so then they put him in immigration detention after he had already done his prison sentence. And so he's going to talk about, and he fought it, obviously. So now he's no longer facing deportation, but he's currently classified as stateless. So he's not a citizen of India, and he's not a citizen of Canada. And that is really brutal, and Dee will talk to you what that means to be stateless, what you can't access if you're neither a citizen of anywhere, and also talking about the experiences in prison versus the experiences in immigration detention. Deepan. Oh, sorry. Do you want to just correct that? Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone for coming out. I will be talking to you today about my experience in detention as well as in criminal aspect and how they overlap essentially. So when I was 19, I got in trouble with the law and I was held at Ottawa College Detention Center. While I was held at Ottawa College Detention Center, I had an altercation with a guard. So then I was thrown into the hole, which is segregation. When I was in segregation, a guard asked me if I was citizen or not. I clearly stated, of course I'm citizen, I'm born in Canada. He went above and beyond and contacted CBSA. There's no adjudication process, there's no screening process for someone to be screened to see what their status is when they come into the Ottawa Detention Center. So once I got out of segregation, I went back to the range. CBSA came and see me, stating that I'm no longer a citizen. I provided them a copy of my birth certificate, and I provided a copy of my passport. About a month later, they came back saying that I'm no longer a citizen, I was never a citizen, I was considered a long-term permanent resident, and revoked my passport. Keep in mind that you can't get your passport revoked in my circumstance. It's never been done, and they have classified it as an error. I got in contact with some media at the time, and I also got in contact with the public safety minister. The public safety minister intervened and stopped my deportation order essentially at that time. Once I got sentenced, I was sentenced to 3 years, and I went to Millhaven. I was at Millhaven. While I was at Millhaven, this is how immigration affected my case and how it affected everything from that point on. I wasn't able to get 1/6. My charge of non-violent charges scheduled 2 offenses, but yet I was not able to get out on 1/6 because I'm dealing with immigration. They classified me as a high risk of flight risk. I wasn't able to take any kind of programs to rehabilitate. I was actually held longer. I wasn't able to take any kind of programs. I wasn't on the regular time frame on the list. I was pushed back because I'm dealing with immigration. Once a year is gone, I was transferred to Joyceville Penitentiary. While I was Joyceville Penitentiary, same process. Couldn't get out earlier, couldn't do any programs, was treated differently based on the fact that I'm dealing with immigration, wasn't able to do any kind of work programs. Everything was different because they believed that at that time, even though I haven't been sentenced or my time hasn't been done with immigration, they claim that I'm not a citizen, so therefore they classified me as a long-term permanent resident. Once my sentence was done, I did 2/3. I was transferred to Toronto West Detention Centre. When I was at Toronto West Detention Centre, it was an eye-opener on terms of how immigrants get treated, essentially. You get treated like you're a dog, essentially. You're in a range with 10 cells. There's 30 people in the range. Barred cells. You're locked down pretty much 24/7. You're out here and there throughout the week. You get yarded maybe once every week. You're supposed to be getting yarded once a day, 1 hour. Food is different. You don't get the same amount of food. If the jail goes on lockdown, you go on lockdown first before the rest of the jail goes on lockdown. You have to hassle them, the guard just to get toilet paper, toothbrush. Canteen is an issue as well. Being in immigration detention, you get treated dramatically differently in terms of using the phone, how guards treat you. Guards treat you like you're a dog, essentially. They tell you straight to your face that we don't care, and if you try to cause any issue, they'll take you outside off the range. Essentially, I can't say this for other individuals, but for me personally, they'll take me off the range, they'll put me against the wall, choke me, and then throw me in the hole. I'll be stuck in the hole until I get healed up and then come back out. Regardless of when my lawyers come to see me, they bury me in the hole. This is how Toronto West Detention, as well as Ottawa College Detention Center, treats the people that are dealing with immigration. So they don't treat you like you're a Canadian citizen. They treat you like a dog, an animal. A dog on the outside will get treated much better than an individual that's inside, based on the fact that your skin color is different and they racial profile you right off the hop. From being from Toronto West Detention Center, I was released after 5.5 months. I've been on conditions from that point on to now. Dealing with the criminal aspect, you do your time, you pay to society, you move on with life. You know when you have your trial dates, you know when you have sentencing, you're done. With immigration, there's no sentencing time frame. You go on and on and on. It's been going on about 4.5 years now, and the courts just recently have clearly stated that I'm no longer a Canadian citizen, but I'm stateless in Canada, even though I'm born in Canada, lived here my whole life. It's the first case like this, as well as the fact that I'm born here, they're trying to deport me, they treat me as a deportation case, even though I'm born here through the whole process, and then I get punished again without having no time frame, no set date for deportation, or now clearly stated that I'm on these conditions indefinitely, which is also a violation of the Charter of Rights. And yeah, that's my short story about my case and how it intertwines between immigration and detention as well as criminal detention. I also want to mention that detention processes are much different than criminal processes. When you're dealing with detention process, you see adjudicator, which is not a judge, who's just appointed by a refugee board, immigration and refugee board, or it gets hired either a CBSA officer or just a person that's applied from the road. They get the job and their decision, they have your life in their hands. So you see this person once after 48 hours, then 7 days, and then 30 days. When you see this individual, they decide your fate, but yet they don't really care about you whatsoever. They already decide before you even go in. Depending on where you are in Ontario, the scale and rates from 2008 to now is dropped dramatically. And there's a pattern clearly showing that from 2008 to now, people are getting held much longer. And the people that get held in detention are mainly color, based on the fact that if you're from Europe, lighter skin color, less time in detention, first-hand knowledge, and there's actual facts out there, you can get on an immigration detention website, clearly show this. If you're from Jamaica, India, Pakistan, darker skin colors are held much longer. People are in detention right now for up to 10 years without a single charge. There's one individual right now at Lindsay Detention Center without one single charge, but held in it for 10 years. So I just want to just explain that there is a very clear line that what the Canadian government is trying to do and how they're merging and how they're justifying what people are on immigration and what they're doing with people that are criminal based on the fact that we're on Indigenous land, yet these people have settled to Canada, now these settlers are telling other settlers they're not welcome, even though settlers have established Canada in the first place. But yeah, that's everything.
Can you just explain statelessness, like different accesses because you're stateless?
Okay, so being stateless, you have nothing. So if you want a driver license, you gotta go to court, you gotta pay fees to go to court. If you want a work permit, to get a work, even though you're born here, you have to take it to court. Photo court will help you get a work permit by filing a mandamus application, forcing CIC to issue a work permit. Healthcare, you don't have healthcare, period. There's very limited healthcare through different community centers that will offer you limited healthcare, but all medication, everything else is covered, not covered, sorry. You gotta pay for it. If you wanna do an x-ray, you gotta pay for it. Everything is taken away. You have no rights, essentially, to how police treat you, to how immigration treat you, but yet you're supposed to be protected on the charter to a certain degree, upheld by SSC, Supreme Court of Canada. Being stateless is like, especially the fact that you're born in the country, you feel like you're nothing, essentially. You're useless because they took everything away from you and you can't do nothing in the interim, but you're still fighting in the long term. So it puts you in a very bad position and also makes you feel really bad that yet Canada is supposed to be establishing the fact that they're saying that they're uphold best in the world for human rights, but yet they're violating international law and violating the charter on a daily basis throughout different cases throughout Canada. So I think that justifies statelessness and in general overcap. Thank you.
And then after this bio, you want to let them know that the person in immigration detention will have on a speakerphone.
So our next speaker is Daniel Parlo. And Daniel Parlo is a First Nation man from Sault Ste. Marie who was born in 1965 and placed into the Children's Aid at the age of 3 months. He was later adopted into a family where alcoholism and abuse were rampant. Dan was later removed from this home and placed in numerous group homes, foster homes, and training schools where the abuse continued. He found himself in conflict with the law from an early age. Oh gosh. Dee, I think your phone died. Can you help me? So.
It's a security feature.
Yeah. So we're talking about heavy stuff, and if there are folks who need to step outside or people to talk to, do we have support folks in the crowd? So those are the support folks, if you need to just talk, if it brings up some heavy stuff from your background. Thank you. So where there was no Young Offenders Act and he was sent to prison amongst men, Daniel's life spiraled downward further and found himself serving an extensive amount of time from 1981 to 2014 with few breaks in between in provincial and federal custody. Some of the prisons he has served time in are Guelph Correctional Center, Millbrook, CC. Federally, he has spent time in SHU, Millhaven, Collins Bay, and Joyceville penitentiaries. Since his release, Dan has enrolled himself at Carleton University and has set his sights on an undergraduate degree in criminology, hopes to one day teach at a university level. Dan wants to be a voice for First Nation people and others who are victimized by a broken system. Daniel Parlo.
I don't think I need to talk.
Are you okay with being recorded?
Yes, sir. My name is Dan. I guess I'll just tell you my story. My story was that at the age of 3 months, I was taken from my mother, and she was considered to be unfit because of her age, placed into a foster home, and from there like the Bible said, there was a lot of abuse was happening, alcoholism, and so on. I struggled a lot, obviously with family issues. Found myself in conflict with the law at a very early age. Placed in foster homes and numerous group homes where the abuse continued. I've struggled with these issues for many years. I'm trying to find identity. Being a First Nation person, a 60 scoop kid. Finding my identity, if you will, right? struggled with that for many years. I found myself, as I said, at an early age in conflict law, starting at Guelph Correctional Center and moving on to Millbrook. I don't know if anybody's familiar with those places, they're now closed, but for several provincial sentences where the treatment back in those days, and if I may just touch on historically about treatment back in those days, you were thrown in segregation for the smallest infractions. You were served a special diet. It was called bean cake. The most horrid stuff you'll ever taste. And as mentioned earlier, treated like a dog. My cell in segregation was nothing but a hole in the floor. There was no mattress. I was placed in a baby doll and given a Bible. So I had a choice of either reading that Bible to keep my sanity or placing over that hole, that toilet, on the floor, because I would go off every 2 minutes and try to get nuts. I was constantly fighting authority, inside in those prisons, not wanting to assimilate that system that, that I felt did me wrong. I found myself in serving federal time at the age of 18 years old. I was placed in Collins Bay Penitentiary at 18. It was known as a gladiator school back then. And, the abuse of power that happens in these places, I cannot speak enough about. There's correctional staff that, don't treat you in a humane way. They see you as nothing but a number, an object, and rehabilitation programs inside corrections don't work. I know there's some that would disagree with me, but I'm telling you they don't work. I spent time in special handling where conditions were even much more tremendous, worse than that. Millhaven, as mentioned earlier, Ivana can speak to that. It's a shit house. Life in there doesn't mean much. You can lose your life at any time. There was a man shot in the gym a few years back, lost his life. And so these places are hate factories, and they don't produce, they don't produce people that back into our society that are healed. It's a broken system. My experience in these places nothing good. Nothing good has come out of that. I have a lot of bad memories about those places, a lot of painful memories. I've lost friends there. But when this is happening day in, day out, these little games, they really get to you psychologically. And then we wonder why men and women in there act out in behaviors. The one thing that I really want to speak about is about what works, and it's called restorative justice. Something I've experienced here in the community. When I first came to Ottawa, I met people who seen the potential in me, and I'm not condone my behaviors from the past, but seen the potential in me and encouraged me to make changes in my life, and it helped me move in that direction. At Carleton University, for instance, and Ottawa University, the people there, they didn't say we don't want you, we don't. Let us think about this. So I enrolled in Carleton University, and today I'm majoring in criminology. There I've met people who are very supportive and helped me move in that direction of change. And this is what restorative justice should look like: restoring that person back into our communities, not locking them up and then throwing them back into the community and best of luck to you. That doesn't work. What happens? We all know what happens. Recidivism. And when we don't have resources and programs going on in our communities and in the prisons, then this is what we find happens. People are lost. People go back in. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. At Carleton, I've had a few profs there have taken me under their wing, and I had that imposter syndrome going on for quite some time there, where I felt I don't belong here. Just a matter of time when they find me out and want me to leave. That hasn't been the case. And so this is something that I'm really big on, about restorative justice, because I've experienced it in my life. And I would like to see the system get on board with that, and personally I'm against prisons. There was a time we didn't have prisons, and And we need to look at that, you know, what was going on back then, you know, and because this is not working. This is not working. Clearly, it's not working. I don't agree with borders either, you know, borders and money. You know, without borders and money, we'd all be rich. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here, but yeah, it brings back some bad memories, but also what's important to me now is that people such as you here in this room that are supportive and online with restorative justice. And I can't stress that enough, how important that is. As I was sitting in this chair, I was heavy, you know, I was heavy-hearted thinking about my brothers and my sisters who are still incarcerated now. And I should mention too what it's like for a First Nation person in a prison. For me, it's not too bad because, you know, I look white. But, you know, as soon as you self-identify yourself as a First Nation person, what I've often heard in the past is, oh, you're one of them? And what do you mean I'm one of them, right? You know, the treatment suddenly changes. Our medicines, our elders, especially our elders, are censored and monitored. You know, they're not freely to move amongst, you know, the prison. You know, often they're faced with, you know, obstacles of getting to speak with people or being held up for periods of time to speak to an individual. You know, through the guards holding them back at a barrier or whatever. These little games they play. This happens a lot. And for the most part in our system, as a society, we think that prisons are rehabilitative. They're gonna, you know, all these good things are happening in there. They're not. I'm telling you, they're not. It sounds good in theory, but there's the human factor to that. The human factor is when you have people in there that are playing these little games and holding you back, and, you know, from coming into those prisons and trying to be that change in that system. You know, these people holding you back doing that, and this is the obstacles that happen there that people face. Often, you know, you'll have, for instance, a counselor that, you know, comes in to see you, and you have a lot of time to see that person. By the time you get down and sit with that person, you have 10 minutes and you have to leave. These little things happen there a lot more than you think. You know, and like I said, I feel heavy-hearted today, thinking about my brothers and sisters who are still in there, you know, and the issues they're facing. It's and for me, where I stand today is for many years I fought that system with my body, you know, in so many different ways. Today I want to fight that system with my mind, you know, and that's getting an education and you know, not that I want to simulate the system, I don't. I fight that, trust me, I fight that. I don't want to simulate the system. And often I feel that way at university, walking the tunnel at Carleton, you know, thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? You know, this is not what I expected, right? You know, and this is not what I wanted. And actually, in a sense too, I was sharing this with one of my profs, you know, about Carleton. You know, I said, you know, you're doing awesome here, Dan, like straight A student. And I thought about this. You know what? I said, Rodney, I said, I guess university is a bit like a prison in a sense. You know, we have a routine we have to follow. You know, there's a certain time we have to be at places, and you know, and maybe this is why I'm doing so well. And I don't know what that says anything, but you know, and I just today I stand before you is just really grateful because there are some people in this room that, you know, have been a part of my journey, and I really appreciate you. And you know, and I just encourage people to spread the word about our brother Deepak, you know, and get that message out there, what they're doing. This needs to be, people need to be aware of this. There's a lot of people who don't know about the situation, or they're misled or misunderstood about it, you know, and I think that, you know, we need to be spreading this word more about what our government's doing to our people. Thank you.
So our next speaker is actually a recording from somebody who is in the Lindsay, Ontario Detention Center right now. So we're just going to play. Thank you. Okay.
I have to amp it up high, so it's on the speakerphone.
You gotta put the mic to the phone.
Okay.
I have to hype it up outside, that's why.
Immigration Enforcement, CDSA. During the slave raid, the slave masters formed a group called the Slave Patrol. And when the black man has worked the whole day and he's taking a break, the Slave Patrol will come and shoot at him and kill him. This Slave Patrol group is now the police department and the immigration department. The slave trade has been abolished, but if you go to the jails, the most people you see in the immigration detentions are the black people. This is another way of slave trade. Where on this planet Earth did the Lord make any boundaries? And which of you, the CBS officers, the public safety minister, Mr. Stephen Bradley, the immigration division members, and the immigration minister, Mr. Chris Alexander, can move the soil that we're standing on, talk less of claiming it to be your own? You are not from here either. You migrate to Canada just like everyone else, except the Aboriginals. I'm a citizen of the world, so I can live anywhere in this world, and Canada is part of the world. The immigration is using the black people to run a big business. They keep us in jail as a jailbird, come and mark their roster every day to get their paychecks. That's how they've been programmed, and that's how the system works. We have precious wives and children out there crying every day for us. People are detained without charges, and there is no trial to prove our innocence. Some people are being detained for 10 years, a decade. So I'm trying to call the world to help us listen to our voices and help us, because something.
Very good. There's something else.
No, I'm tied out at that.
Okay, so that was reporting. I think he's also part of the hunger strike or the strike, the detention strike.
He's in Lindsay detention right now.
Yes.
Okay. So actually, can I say a few words? Okay, that's great. Okay, great. So I don't think I introduced myself earlier. My name is Lucayo Estrella, Bicolano at Tagalog ako. So I'm Bicolano and Tagalog. So that's my place of origin, which is, I guess, colonially called the Philippines. I immigrated here with my family when I was 3. And I was super lucky to be here. So we first settled in Toronto, so that's Haudenosaunee, Mississauga, Huron Territory, and then I went to Algonquin Territory here, Ottawa, for school. Carleton, dance out here, but yes, Carleton for 4 years, and I got a degree. And that didn't really do me that well, but so I think a lot of people have touched me and imparted wisdom to me, such as Annie St. George Smith. She's an Algonquin elder. Andrea Smith, also an Indigenous scholar. Harsha Walia, who was part of known as Illegal in various other cities. One of my partners, Gabe Castello, a two-spirit person. Some supporters here who have also spoken to me. And so I just want to kind of bring a lot of the conversations together and leave some questions for folks to think about and to organize with, and to support the different organizations here. But one of the things through listening to these people and learning from them and elders and other folks, also Naomi Marty, who organized the Ferguson Vigil. If you folks don't know, there was a shooting in Ferguson. It's been over a month, and the person who shot Mike Brown has not been arrested yet. And the shooting was specifically racially profiled crime, and so these things happen. Specifically, this idea that Canada is a legal nation. When we do our chants for known as legal, we talk about known as illegal, Canada is illegal. This idea of these folks who come on land, many of which is stolen, like the story of Ottawa, which I heard from a gentleman named Bob Lovelace. Philemon Wright came here, told the Algonquin people that he had a treaty, he had papers to settle here and create a European settlement. He did not. He lied to them. First, they disagreed because they didn't hear that from other people. He kept pressuring them, saying, yes, I have the right to build here. Finally, he tricked them, and then he destroyed their sugar bushes, so that was part of their livelihood, destroyed the pastures where their game would hunt, So it eventually forced the Algonquin people out of here. He named the place Bytown. It eventually became Ottawa. So when we say this is unsurrendered, unceded Algonquin territory, this is the Algonquin people's land, it was taken them by Philemon right. And so that's how Ottawa was settled. So these are stories of pain that this nation has built on for hundreds of years, and then they continue to build the segregation on an ancient hatred called racism and colonialism, right? So if we look at the prison system and the immigration system, both of which are fucked up and terrible, pardon my swearing, but see the overrepresentation of First Nations and Inuit people in the prison system, and also black people in the prison system, in male prison systems, it's sometimes on par with the amount of First Nations and Inuit men that are in prisons. And then in women prisons, there's 70% of them are First Nations and Inuit women, but First Nations and Inuit people make up, according to Statistics Canada, 4% of the population. It's a very specific target, and especially in immigration systems, also targeting Muslim nations and black folks. And so this system of segregation, of cutting out borders, is a creation of this state. And the idea of prison, like Dan brought up, beforehand, there wasn't any kind of prison system. Like during a discussion with Elder Annie St. George from the Algonquin, she talked about restorative justice as well, like Dan did. And how about they really want to promote that, that's the way that they reach out to their First Nations and Inuit youth. That was the way before the prison system came, and that part of the prison system is an ongoing way to try to colonize the land, try to make it specifically for the folks who came here to try to steal it, like the people like Philemon Wright. So when we're asking to abolish borders, we're not just asking, for the right of immigrant folks and migrant folks. We're also asking, for justice and sovereignty for First Nations and Inuit people. So it's all brought together, and we just want, and folks want, to just have that ability, freedom to move, freedom to return, freedom to stay, freedom to honor your agreements and your treaties with each other. One of the most beautiful stories that I heard through NOII Illegal is when a boatload of migrants came on the West Coast. I think you remember this, Daniel. And immigration was going to try to send them away. There was a lot of words in Canadian media about these illegals, these criminals, this boatload of criminals. Do you remember what country it was from? Sri Lanka. Yeah, Tamil refugees. And yet, NOII Illegal got together with East Coast Salish elders, and they welcomed them to the land, and they said, this is our land too, this is our land first, and if you come in a good way, then we will welcome you. And that was one of the beautiful things that can come when we work together. We try to fight the system that tries to segregate people, that tries to put them in boxes and in borders. I also work in other areas as well, and it's all kind of put together. So I help with LGBTQ, so that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, refugees, and folks who are also settlers here. And being put in borders continues not just in your skin color, but in who you love, and how your gender is expressed, and how you identify, and how your bodies are. It's all about trying to control your bodies to be a specific thing. So there's definitely an overrepresentation as well of police brutality against trans feminine people, which should be acknowledged, specifically, Indigenous First Nations, Inuit trans women, Black trans women, and trans women in general. So once again, it's this borders that we're trying to disrupt, both in the mind. So we have to fight the system in the mind, like Dan talked about. What we have to do on the ground, try to bring these systems into public awareness, so we can change legislation, but also so that we can heal amongst each other. Like one of the folks that NOII Illegal is in solidarity with, so Families of Sisters in Spirit, and they work specifically with families of the over 800, maybe over 1,000 missing and murdered Aboriginal Indigenous women in Canada right now, which the government refuses to see as an epidemic, and is now claiming that it's because they have abusive husbands. And not even noticing how many of those husbands are First Nations or not First Nations, and how many are actually because of police brutality. But folks like Families of Sisters in Spirit realize that calling an inquiry or always asking for the government to help them will never happen. Like the government cut off their funding to support those families. So it's about working with each other, working with community members and grassroots organizations like this, so we can feed each other, so we can feast together, so we can heal together, so we can create alternative systems. I know other groups have tried to do alternative transformative justice and restorative justice systems, ways where we can teach each other about these things and work within our communities so that we don't replicate punitive measures, so we don't end up, putting each other in social jails and emotional jails, punishing each other, replicating the same thing. So anyways, those are things I want you folks to think about. If folks on the floor want to talk as well, and we can start a community discussion, I just want to do a quick time check. I see you there, Dan. It's 8:17, so we have the room till 8:30. What's that mean?
9.
Till 9? Okay,
We have to
apparently
clean up.
we have to start cleaning up at 8:30, so in 12 minutes I'm going to start putting food away, but we can still continue having the discussion until 9 o'clock. All right, thank you very much for listening to me. Maraming salamat po. Yeah, sure. So the floor is open for folks to talk and to eat.
Something I forgot to mention, I think is really important about the system, how it's set up to have a person plead guilty to move out of that, provincial jail to a federal penitentiary. Often the conditions in the provincial jail are set up that way, so that the person will be, I can't take this anymore, I can't deal with this anymore, I'll just plead guilty. And this is happening actually on First Nation communities, fly-in reservations. And what's happening there is that you have a court system that shows up to this community and says, you know what, just plead this deal, plead guilty, because you know why? Because nobody wants to be there. You have white privileged judges, lawyers, crowns, just don't want to be there. So anyways, just get this over and get out of here. So they say, this is probably your best deal to take, just plead guilty. And what happens is I've met many of men, inside pens who come from remote communities because of that. This is a guilty plea. And I think that, this is something we need to look at and something needs to be corrected. People's rights are being trampled on. Thank you.